The rain tasted like ash. My face burned, not from the cold, but from the sting of their laughter echoing in my ears. The expensive dress I'd chosen was ruined, plastered against my skin, mocking the effort I'd made to fit in. They were celebrating inside, toasting to their success, oblivious to the storm brewing both outside and within me. The day they decided I didn't belong was the day they signed their own downfall. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own flesh in crimson, subscribe now to find your strength. My name is Abigail, and for years, I tried desperately to earn a place in my family. My parents, bless their hearts, always tried to bridge the gap, but my brother, Ethan, and his wife, Bethany, made it their personal mission to keep me on the fringes. Maybe it was because I wasn't a carbon copy of them. Maybe it was because I chose a different path, a career in travel, curating dream vacations for others instead of joining the family's boring finance firm. Whatever the reason, I was always the outsider looking in, the one who never quite measured up. When Mom and Dad announced their dream trip to Paris, a culmination of their lifelong savings, I saw my chance. Planning their itinerary, securing the best hotels, arranging private tours, it was my way of showing them I cared, of finally contributing something meaningful. For weeks, I pored over every detail, fueled by the hope that this time things would be different. This time, maybe, I'd finally be seen as part of the family. The initial weeks were amazing. My parents were thrilled with the itinerary. They kept remarking how I had a real gift for this. My dad even suggested I leave my job to plan their trips. It felt like I was finally being seen. Even Ethan and Bethany seemed impressed, offering rare compliments about my organizational skills. I started to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the wall between us was finally crumbling. That's when I overheard the conversation that shattered everything. It was during a family dinner, a rare occasion when everyone was gathered around the same table. I'd stepped out onto the patio to take a call, leaving my phone on the table. I was walking back when I heard Ethan's voice, laced with a venom I hadn't known he possessed. "Why is she even here?" he spat, the words hitting me like a physical blow. "She's always been a charity case, mooched my mom and dad. Now she thinks planning a stupid vacation makes her one of us?" Bethany chimed in, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Honestly, Ethan, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. Abigail is so awkward. We need to be a family, a real family, not this charade where we pretend she belongs." The crimson drained from my face. I stood frozen, unable to move, as they continued to dissect me, their words twisting like knives in my gut. I felt like a child again, standing on the sidelines, watching everyone else play.
The person I trusted most was one of them, my mother. I heard her voice, soft yet firm. "Ethan, Bethany, let's not be cruel. Abigail is trying. She truly wants to be closer to the family." I felt a flicker of hope, until I heard what she said next. But I agree with Bethany. She is just different. Let's enjoy Paris without the constant worry of whether she's comfortable. Maybe next time, I'll tell her that she isn't welcome. My breath hitched. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Next time? There wouldn't be a next time. The carefully constructed facade of family shattered into a million pieces. The hope I'd clung to for so long withered and died. I walked away, unnoticed, the sound of their laughter fading into the background. The trip was scheduled in less than a week. They thought I'd accept their decision, that I'd simply fade back into the shadows. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. The rain tasted like ash. My face burned, not from the cold, but from the sting of their laughter echoing in my ears. The expensive dress I'd chosen was ruined, plastered against my skin, mocking the effort I'd made to fit in. They were celebrating inside, toasting to their success, oblivious to the storm brewing both outside and within me. The day they decided I didn't belong was the day they signed their own downfall. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own flesh in crimson, subscribe now to find your strength. My name is Abigail, and for years I tried desperately to earn a place in my family. My parents, bless their hearts, always tried to bridge the gap, but my brother Ethan and his wife Bethany made it their personal mission to keep me on the fringes. Maybe it was because I wasn't a carbon copy of them. Maybe it was because I chose a different path, a career in travel,
curating dream vacations for others instead of joining the family's boring finance firm. Whatever the reason, I was always the outsider looking in, the one who never quite measured up. When Mom and Dad announced their dream trip to Paris, a culmination of their lifelong savings, I saw my chance. Planning their itinerary, securing the best hotels, arranging private tours, it was my way of showing them I cared, of finally contributing something meaningful. For weeks, I pored over every detail, fueled by the hope that this time, things would be different. This time, maybe, I'd finally be seen as part of the family. The initial weeks were amazing. My parents were thrilled with the itinerary. They kept remarking how I had a real gift for this. My dad even suggested I leave my job to plan their trips. It felt like I was finally being seen. Even Ethan and Bethany seemed impressed, offering rare compliments about my organizational skills. I started to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the wall between us was finally crumbling. That's when I overheard the conversation that shattered everything. It was during a family dinner, a rare occasion when everyone was gathered around the same table. I'd stepped out onto the patio to take a call, leaving my phone on the table. I was walking back when I heard Ethan's voice, laced with a venom I hadn't known he possessed. "Why is she even here?" he spat, the words hitting me like a physical blow. She's always been a charity case, mooching off Mom and Dad. Now she thinks planning a stupid vacation makes her one of us? Bethany chimed in, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Honestly, Ethan, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. Abigail is so awkward. We need to be a family, a real family, not this charade where we pretend she belongs." The crimson trained from my face. I stood frozen, unable to move, as they continued to dissect me, their words twisting like knives in my gut. I felt like a child again, standing on the sidelines, watching everyone else play. The person I trusted most was one of them, my mother. I heard her voice, soft yet firm. "Ethan, Bethany, let's not be cruel. Abigail is trying. She truly wants to be closer to the family." I felt a flicker of hope, until I heard what she said next. "But I agree with Bethany. She is just different. Let's enjoy Paris without the constant worry of whether she's comfortable. Maybe next time, I'll tell her that she isn't welcome." My breath hitched. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Next time? There wouldn't be a next time. The carefully constructed facade of family shattered into a million pieces. The hope I'd clung to for so long withered and died. I walked away, unnoticed, the sound of their laughter fading into the background. The trip was scheduled in less than a week. They thought I'd accept their decision, that I'd simply fade back into the shadows. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. The first few days were a blur of disbelief and raw, aching hurt. I replayed the conversation in my head 1,000 times, each repetition sharpening the edges of their cruelty. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford, my nights filled with restless tossing and turning, haunted by the echo of their dismissive words. The weight of their rejection pressed down on me, suffocating me with its immensity. I tried to reason with myself, to find some logical explanation for their behavior, but the truth was inescapable. They simply didn't want me. I considered confronting them, pouring out my heart, begging them to see me, to accept me. But the thought of facing their cold, indifferent stares paralyzed me with fear. What if they simply confirmed my worst fears, telling me that I was indeed unwanted, unloved? The risk was too great. So I retreated into myself, building walls around my heart, determined to protect myself from further pain. I started avoiding family gatherings, making excuses to decline their invitations. I couldn't bear to be around them, to witness their happy facade, knowing that I was excluded from their inner circle. My parents, bless their hearts, noticed my withdrawal and tried to reach out, but I deflected their attempts with polite smiles and vague assurances. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth, to reveal the depth of my hurt. I feared that it would only cause them more pain, forcing them to choose between their children. And so I suffered in silence, my pain a secret burden I carried alone. Work became my refuge, a place where I could escape the suffocating weight of my family drama. I threw myself into my job, working late nights, obsessing over every detail of my clients' travel plans. It was a distraction, a way to numb the pain, but it was also a form of self-destruction. I neglected my own needs, sacrificing my health and well-being in a desperate attempt to prove my worth. I was determined to show them, to show everyone, that I was not a charity case, that I was capable of achieving success on my own. But the more I pushed myself, the more empty I felt inside. The void within me grew larger, threatening to swallow me whole. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I found myself staring at the meticulously planned Paris itinerary I had created for my parents. It was a masterpiece, a testament to my skill and dedication. Every detail was perfect, every experience carefully curated. And yet it was all for naught. They wouldn't appreciate it. They wouldn't even know the effort I had put into it. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. I grabbed the itinerary and tore it to shreds, the pieces of paper fluttering to the floor like fallen leaves. It was a symbolic act, a release of the pent-up frustration and resentment that had been festering inside me. But it was also a turning point. In that moment, I realized that I couldn't continue down this path of self-destruction. I couldn't let their rejection define me. I had to find a way to reclaim my power, to take control of my own destiny. The anger began to simmer, solidifying into a cold, burning resolve. I would not let them win. I would not let them break me. I would make them regret their decision, not with tears or pleas, but with a calculated, precise revenge. The seed of a plan began to sprout in my mind, a dark and twisted idea that promised to turn their perfect world upside down. It would be risky, dangerous even, but the thought of seeing their faces when they realized the extent of their mistake fueled my determination. I would use their own arrogance, their own sense of entitlement against them. I would expose their hypocrisy, their lies, their carefully constructed facade of perfection. They thought they were untouchable, immune to the consequences of their actions. They were wrong. The exact day they tried to end me, I'd have to be ready.
The following days were a descent into darkness. I stopped eating, the thought of food turning my stomach. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by endless replays of the patio conversation, each iteration a fresh wave of agony. My apartment, once a sanctuary, transformed into a prison, the walls closing in on me, suffocating me with their silence. I called in sick to work, unable to face the world, to feign normalcy when my insides were crumbling. I spent my days huddled on the couch, staring blankly at the television, the flickering images failing to penetrate the fog of despair that had enveloped my mind. I was a ghost, a shadow of my former self, adrift in a sea of sorrow. The world outside continued to spin, oblivious to my pain, the sun rising and setting with indifferent regularity. But in my little corner of the universe, time stood still, frozen in the moment of betrayal. I felt utterly alone, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me, the people who were supposed to be my family. Even my parents, with their well-meaning attempts to comfort me, seemed distant, unable to comprehend the depth of my hurt. They couldn't understand that it wasn't just about being excluded from a trip. It was about the years of subtle rejection, the constant feeling of not being good enough, the crushing realization that I would never truly belong. I was broken, shattered into a million pieces, with no hope of ever being whole again. I considered ending it all, of simply giving up, of escaping the pain that had become unbearable. The thought flickered through my mind like a dark and tempting flame, promising oblivion, a release from the torment. But something held me back, a tiny spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. It was a whisper of anger, a flicker of resentment, a stubborn refusal to let them win. They wanted me to disappear, to fade into the shadows. They wanted me to be the awkward, unwanted outsider. And for a while, I had let them. I had allowed their words to define me, to dictate my worth. But no more. Then it all changed. I had been staring at the ceiling for who knows how long, the muted sunlight painting stripes across the room. I felt numb, devoid of emotion, beyond caring. But then, something shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like a muscle twitching after a long period of paralysis. I thought of Ethan's smug face, of Bethany's saccharine smile, of my mother's carefully chosen words. I remembered the years of subtle digs, the casual dismissals, the constant feeling of being judged, and a new feeling began to stir within me, a feeling that was stronger than the pain, more potent than the despair. It was anger, pure, unadulterated rage. It burned through the numbness, igniting a fire in my belly. My vision blurred, the glass in my hand shattered. They thought they could dismiss me, that they could erase me from their lives without consequence.
They thought I was weak, that I would simply accept their decision and slink away in silence. They underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my silence for submission. They would soon learn the error of their ways. I sat up, the sudden movement sending a jolt of energy through my body. I looked around the room, my eyes taking in the mess I had created, the remnants of my despair. The shattered glass glittered on the floor like tiny diamonds, reflecting the sunlight in a dazzling display of defiance. I stood up, my legs wobbly at first, but growing stronger with each step. I walked to the window and threw it open, letting the fresh air flood into the room, chasing away the stale scent of sorrow. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the promise of a new beginning. The Abigail they knew was gone, shattered like the glass on the floor. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, someone who was no longer afraid, someone who was fueled by a burning desire for revenge. The first step was to gather information. I needed to know everything about their lives, their secrets, their weaknesses. I started subtly, casually probing my parents for details about Ethan's business dealings, about Bethany's social life. I pretended to be making small talk, to be showing an interest in their lives, but in reality, I was carefully gathering ammunition. I reactivated old social media accounts that I had long abandoned, using them to monitor their online activity, to track their movements, to glean any information that could be used against them. I discovered that Ethan's business wasn't as successful as he liked to portray. He was heavily in debt, teetering on the brink of financial ruin. And Bethany, with her perfect smile and her impeccable manners, was having an affair with one of Ethan's colleagues. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Their perfect facade was cracking, revealing the ugly truth beneath. I knew I was on the right track. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. I started documenting everything, collecting evidence, building a case against them. I meticulously recorded every conversation, every email, every social media post. I created a digital file, a secret archive of their lies and betrayals. I knew that I had to be careful, that one wrong move could expose my plan and ruin everything. I moved in the shadows, a silent observer, watching their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was a dangerous game, but I was willing to risk everything for the chance to exact my revenge. I would make them pay for what they had done to me. I would expose their lies, their hypocrisy, their cruelty. I would watch as their perfect world crumbled around them. And then, finally, I would be free. The exact day they tried to end me would be the day they faced my wrath. I knew I couldn't just barge in and scream accusations. That would get me nowhere. This had to be precise, surgical. I decided to start with Ethan's business. I remembered him bragging about a new deal he'd closed, something about a land development project outside the city. I started digging, using publicly available records to trace the property ownership. It didn't take long to find irregularities, permits that were rushed through, zoning laws that seemed to bend in his favor. Something was rotten, and I was determined to find the source. I spent hours at the county records office, poring over documents, cross-referencing names and dates. I felt like a detective in a movie, piecing together a complex puzzle. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. Ethan was involved in some shady dealings, cutting corners and bribing officials to get his project approved. The land he was developing was supposedly protected wetlands, and he'd managed to get the designation removed through some backroom deals. I knew this was big.
this could ruin him, but I needed proof, something concrete that I could take to the authorities. I couldn't rely on circumstantial evidence. I needed a smoking gun. That's when I remembered something Ethan had said during one of our family dinners. He'd mentioned having a meeting with a city council member at a local restaurant. I decided to check the restaurant security footage. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. I called the restaurant, pretending to be a police officer investigating a minor traffic accident. I explained that I needed to review the footage from a specific date and time. The manager was hesitant at first, but after a bit of persuasion, he agreed to let me come in and take a look. I spent hours watching the grainy footage, fast-forwarding and rewinding, searching for any sign of Ethan and the council member. Finally, there it was. Ethan handing the council member a thick envelope under the table, the council member discreetly pocketing it. It was undeniable. I copied the footage onto a USB drive, my heart pounding in my chest. I had my smoking gun. Turning my attention to Bethany, I knew her weakness was her image. She craved admiration, constantly curating her online presence to project an image of perfection. Her social media accounts were filled with carefully staged photos and glowing posts about her perfect life. I decided to use that against her. I created a fake online profile, posing as a wealthy socialite. I started following Bethany's accounts, liking her posts and leaving flattering comments. It didn't take long for her to notice me. She sent me a private message, thanking me for my support and inviting me to connect with her on other platforms. I played along, showering her with compliments and feigning admiration for her lifestyle. I learned that she was planning a charity gala, a major social event that she was organizing to raise her profile. I saw an opportunity.
I volunteered to help with the event, offering my expertise in event planning. Bethany was thrilled. She welcomed me with open arms, eager to have another wealthy socialite involved in her project. I started attending planning meetings, observing Bethany's every move, gathering information about her affair. I discovered that she was using the charity's funds to pay for her own personal expenses, diverting donations to her own bank account. I collected bank statements, receipts, and emails, building a solid case against her. I also learned the identity of her lover, Ethan's colleague, a man named David. I started communicating with him through another fake profile, posing as a disgruntled employee of Ethan's company. I fed him information about Ethan's shady business dealings, knowing that he would eventually confront Bethany about it. My plan was to create chaos, to turn them against each other, to watch their perfect world crumble from within. The hardest part was dealing with my parents. They noticed that I was acting strangely, that I was withdrawn and secretive. They tried to talk to me, to offer their support, but I pushed them away, afraid that they would discover my plan. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, that it was hurting them, but I couldn't stop. I was consumed by my desire for revenge, blinded by my anger and resentment. One evening, my mother came to my apartment unannounced. She found me hunched over my computer, surrounded by documents and files. She looked at me with concern in her eyes. "Abigail, what's going on?" she asked gently. "You haven't been yourself lately. Are you okay?" I couldn't meet her gaze. I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly suppressed it. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just busy with work." She didn't believe me. She could see the pain in my eyes, the darkness that had taken root in my soul. She reached out and took my hand. "Abigail, please," she said, "talk to me. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." I wanted to tell her the truth, to pour out my heart, to beg for her forgiveness, but I couldn't. I was too far gone, too deep into my plan. I pulled my hand away from hers. "I can't, Mom," I said. "Just leave me alone." She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. "I'm worried about you, Abigail," she said. "Please be careful." And then she left, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my guilt, and my burning desire for revenge. I replayed the security camera footage again and again. The day was almost here. I had everything I needed. They had no idea what was coming. The charity gala was Bethany's masterpiece, a glittering spectacle of wealth and privilege held at the city's most exclusive hotel. Champagne flowed freely, the air thrummed with music, and the room pulsed with the energy of the city's elite. Bethany, dressed in a designer gown, floated through the crowd, basking in the attention, radiating confidence. I watched her from across the room, a ghost in the machine, observing her every move. She had no idea that her perfect world was about to shatter. I made my way to the sound booth, where I had earlier planted a USB drive containing all the evidence I had collected against her, the bank statements, the receipts, the emails detailing her affair. I waited for the perfect moment, for Bethany to take the stage to give her opening remarks. As she stepped up to the microphone, a hush fell over the crowd. This was it. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I glanced at the sound technician, a nervous young man who I had befriended earlier in the evening. He gave me a subtle nod. It was time. He hit play. The music cut out, replaced by a recording of Bethany's voice. At first, it sounded like a normal speech, thanking the guests for their support. But then the recording shifted, morphing into a conversation between Bethany and her lover, David. Their voices echoed through the ballroom, their words laced with desire and deceit. The crowd gasped, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. Bethany froze on stage, her face turning ashen. I watched as her perfect facade crumbled, her carefully constructed image shattered into a million pieces. The recording continued, revealing details of her affair, her lies, her betrayal of Ethan. The room was silent, except for the sound of Bethany's voice, confessing her sins for all to hear. Then the recording switched again, this time playing audio of Bethany discussing her embezzlement of the charity's funds, outlining how she rerouted money into her personal account, proving every step with accompanying transaction details displayed on the screens flanking the stage. The silence broke. Murmurs erupted. People started whispering, pointing, and staring at Bethany with disgust. Her face crumbled. She looked like she was about to faint. Meanwhile, I had sent an anonymous tip to the authorities about Ethan's bribery scheme, providing them with the security footage from the restaurant. I knew that they would be waiting for him at his office, ready to arrest him. I watched as chaos unfolded, as Bethany's world imploded, as Ethan's empire crumbled. My revenge was complete. Or so I thought. I received a text from an unknown number. It contained a single picture, a photo of my parents sitting at their kitchen table, looking worried. The message read, "Nice show, but you forgot about collateral damage." I froze, my blood turning to ice. They had my parents. Panic seized me, a cold wave washing over my body. I had been so focused on my revenge that I had failed to protect the people I loved. I had exposed my parents to danger, made them targets. I had to get to them, had to warn them. I raced out of the hotel, hailing a taxi. I gave the driver my parents' address, my voice trembling with fear. As we sped through the city streets, my mind raced, trying to anticipate what was waiting for me. What would they do to my parents? What could I do to stop them? I should have known they wouldn't play fair. I should have anticipated that they would stoop to any level to protect themselves. But I had been blinded by my rage, consumed by my desire for revenge. Now, my parents were paying the price. I had to save them, no matter the cost. I arrived at my parents' house, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was dark, eerily silent. I cautiously approached the front door, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty house. No answer. The living room was a mess, furniture overturned, lamps broken. A crimson stain on the carpet. My blood ran cold. They were gone. And I was too late. I saw a note on the floor. Scrawled in messy handwriting, it read, "Come alone if you want to see them again." An address was written below, a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a trap. I knew it. But I had no choice. I had to go. I gripped the steering wheel, the taxi hurtling toward the deserted warehouse. Each mile felt like a year, each breath a struggle. The image of my parents, vulnerable and afraid, burned in my mind. I had to be strong. I had to be smarter. I had to save them. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the warehouse. The building was a hulking mass of shadows, the only light emanating from a single flickering bulb above the entrance. I paid the driver and stepped out, the cold night air biting at my skin. I walked toward the entrance, my senses on high alert, scanning for any sign of movement. I pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped inside. The warehouse was vast and empty, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. A single spotlight illuminated a small circle in the center of the room. My parents were tied to chairs, their faces pale and drawn. Ethan and Bethany stood beside them, their expressions a mixture of anger and triumph. "Welcome, Abigail," Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Bethany smirked, her eyes glinting with malice. "You really thought you could get away with this, didn't you? You thought you could destroy us?" I ignored them, my focus solely on my parents. "Are you okay?"
I asked, my voice trembling. "We're fine, honey," my mother said, her voice weak but reassuring. "Just be careful." Ethan stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. "You ruined everything," he screamed. "Everything I worked for." Bethany nodded in agreement.
"We were going to have it all," she said, her voice filled with bitterness, "and you took it away from us." I took a deep breath, trying to control my fear. "You brought this on yourselves," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You made your choices, and now you have to face the consequences." Ethan lunged at me, his fist raised. I sidestepped his attack, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. He cried out in pain. Bethany rushed toward me, her hand clutching a knife. I kicked her legs out from under her, sending her crashing to the ground. I disarmed her, kicking the knife away. I stood over them, my body trembling with adrenaline. "Let my parents go," I said, my voice cold and hard, "or things are going to get much worse for you." They hesitated, their eyes filled with hate. I didn't want to physically hurt them, but I would if it meant saving my parents. That's when the warehouse doors burst open and several police officers stormed in, guns drawn. I had tipped them off, giving them the location just before I entered. They moved swiftly, apprehending Ethan and Bethany, freeing my parents. The trial was a media circus. Ethan and Bethany were charged with multiple felonies, including bribery, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and they had no defense. They tried to blame each other, turning on each other in a desperate attempt to save themselves. But it was too late. Their lies and betrayals had finally caught up with them. They were both found guilty on all counts and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The judge didn't hold back, saying their actions were despicable and that they had abused their positions of power. As they were led away in handcuffs, I watched them, my face expressionless. Ethan looked defeated, his eyes hollow and empty. Bethany's face was a mask of rage and resentment. Their perfect world had crumbled, their lives ruined. They had lost everything. In the aftermath, my parents and I worked to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. The scars of their betrayal ran deep, but we were together, and that was all that mattered. We focused on healing, on moving forward, on creating a new life for ourselves. As for me, I disappeared. I sold my apartment, changed my name, and moved to a small town far away from the city. I wanted a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind. I never looked back. Years later, I saw a small article online about Ethan and Bethany. They were both released from prison, but they were pariahs, shunned by society, unable to find work or rebuild their lives. They were living in poverty, their reputations forever tarnished. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more Justice.